In the last year, one of the few bright spots in an otherwise turbulent Middle East has been the Abraham Accords, which normalize relations between Israel and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, as well as Morocco and Sudan. The Accords also has created opportunities to connect Israelis and Emiratis through collaborations in storytelling and film. The UAE's ambassador to the United States, Yousef Al Otaiba, was one of the principal architects of the Abraham Accords. Ambassador Al Otaiba, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Biana. The trade and the economic piece of the Abraham Accords is already flourishing, and I was never really worried about it, to be honest. That piece of the Abraham Accords was always going to succeed and was always going to succeed very quickly. Business communities around the world typically find each other and find deals that work for both sides. The part I'm most excited about, and I think reflects a bigger breakthrough, is the cultural understanding part. It's this breaking of a taboo that we cannot work with Israel in any field because of politics. As you'll be discussing tonight, one of the first MOUs that was announced after the Abraham Accords was a joint film festival between the UAE and Israel. These are the kinds of things that really break cultural barriers and stereotypes and misconceptions about each other. When people try to understand how the other side thinks, how they understand things, how they view things, that's what makes the major breakthroughs. Like, I'm really excited to find out that one day an Israeli filmmaker is going to work with his Emirati counterpart, and then they can compare notes about what inspires them, where they get their motivation, or how they work, how they edit, how they direct. You know, I'm a very proud half Egyptian. I grew up in Egypt, I have Egyptian roots, but I grew up in Egypt still believing that Israel is an adversary. And yes, there's history there, there's wars and there's border disputes. But even after Sadat's trip, most Egyptians believe Israel's an adversary. My 10-year-old son is not going to grow up thinking Israel's an adversary. He's going to grow up thinking it's normal to do business with Israel. He's going to grow up watching Israeli shows and movies. And possibly that even some of them can be joint collaborations between Emirati and Israeli filmmakers. So I think it's a great thing for people to have a better understanding of one another, because at the end of the day, we're all going to live together here, and we're all going to work together here. So I think the piece about cultural understanding and respect and knowledge is, to me, the most exciting part of the Abraham Accords. So I want to thank the AAM for all the work that it's doing to facilitate these kinds of cultural connections. And I'm delighted to see that Avi Nir, one of Israel's top media executives, is with us tonight to discuss this with our film commissioner in Abu Dhabi, Hans Fraikin. This is the kind of discussion that will lead to better understanding. And thank you again to AAM for doing this. I hope everybody gets to watch this, and I hope we make a lot of progress together. Thank you very much.
Well, tonight we're also delighted to be joined by Hans Fraikin, the film commissioner of Abu Dhabi and a longtime media executive. And Avi Nir is the CEO of Keshet Media Group, one of Israel's largest media companies, and a longtime producer and writer. Among other successes, Keshet produced the Israeli series Hatufim that became the basis for the American series Homeland, for which Avi Nir won an Emmy. Thank you both so much for joining us. Let me begin with you, Hans. I think for many people, when they try to break down what the Abraham Accords means, not just regionally, but globally, they think of security, diplomatic, economic benefits. But just from a cultural perspective, what do you see this Accords, this new merger, this agreement, cooperation, in terms of what it does for the film industry and the TV industry in Abu Dhabi?
You know, very shortly after the Accords were signed in September of last year, we knew that we had to move forward with the cultural aspect of the bilateral industrial agreements, and especially when it came to film and TV. For so many reasons, but the main one, being the soft diplomacy nature of entertainment and how it can build bridges and cultural sharing and awareness. And so very shortly after the Accords were signed, I called Lisa Shalot-Uzrad, who's an ex-counterpart of mine and the executive director of the Israeli Film Fund, with the idea of creating a collaboration agreement between us off the back of the Abraham Accords. And she immediately got it, understood why we wanted to do it.
Well, Avi, before we get to that, I want to just get you to weigh in here too, because as somebody who has successfully exported content in your past, I'm curious what you saw in the Accords that could create new contact and new opportunities between Israel and UAE and even beyond.
Yeah, thank you, Bianna, and a pleasure to meet you. A pleasure to meet you, Hans, and thank you very much for the ambassador. I have a pessimistic point of view. So I see the opportunity on one hand. On the other hand, I know that what's called the cold peace. Israel has cold peace with some countries, and I see the big challenge of how do you make these kind of diplomatic accords and sometimes economic accords, cultural accords. Turns out that the cultural level is the most difficult level of all, because that really requires a totally different cooperation of really meeting them. It has to be very authentic, not only in the level of the leaders, but also in the level of creators. So I'm asking myself, and I see the openness and the willingness from the UA, and I think it's very unique in the landscape. And I was trying to think, apart from what Hans said about the more institutionalized cooperation, what can we do in the private sector? How can we take and harness our abilities? And I am, just off the bat, I was thinking of proposing making a deal right now, and Bianna can sign this, and saying, what do you think? Maybe we create a fund. We each have our sources, our private sources, and we create this initiative of someone who will, and we'll create a series together and say, okay, let the best man win, let the best creator win. And the big creative challenge, there are many Israeli series about the conflict, starting from Fauda, and we did Our Boys, but can we have a narrative which is not dealing directly with the conflict? Of course, it will not elude the conflict, it will not ignore this, but can we tell another story? And I think this is a big creative challenge of not just telling the stories of Israelis and Arabs and the conflict, but a different story. That's a big challenge. So one challenge is, do we create a series together and put the money together? And another thought, and excuse me for making this very direct, is can we create a news channel? Can we create a mutual news channel? We have Rihanna on the show, as our lead host, and maybe Unit will chip in and other. And what do you think of just having the news in this age of biased news? Can we have a different initiative in the news arena?
The idea of this agreement I was talking about, Avi, is really to start at the building blocks, and for several reasons. So one is so the two cultures and filmmakers, and writers can start to know each other, start to share experiences, take the time they need to start thinking of the naturally organic stories that could be entertainment on any format and any genre.
I totally agree. I think we just need a parallel efforts. One this kind of effort and the one with the private sector effort, and I think the mutual efforts will bear fruits sooner than later.
In the pipeline now, are you seeing or hearing of anecdotally any ventures, any projects between the two sides following these accords now? At least some projects in the works.
We have one idea. I can mention it now because it's about a tahini factory in Israel, and I think it's a great idea. It's a woman empowerment, and this is actually our favorite, and we'll probably give you a call, Hans, one of these days with this project, because I think this is for me this is the best one that can fit both sensitivities in both countries, and as Hans said, be organic as an organic collaboration in order to create something that's more than an economic partnership.
I want to thank you both Hans and Avi, for your time. Congratulations again on this award, and more importantly, congratulations on really doing, I think, the world a huge benefit by coming together culturally and thinking about ideas that can bring us all closer together. Thank you.
We'll do our best. Thank you. Thank you
Nice.
very much, Bianca. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thanks, Bianca. Thanks, Avi.